Hello, my name is Kaylee Alexander, and I am the CDVS Graduate Assistant with Humanities Unbounded for the summer of 2020. Today, I'm going to be guiding you through this workshop, transforming single spreadsheets into normalized tables using Excel. The purpose of this workshop is to demonstrate for those with minimal or no coding experience some simple steps in Excel that you can take to transform a single spreadsheet, such as the master copy of your data set, into a series of normalized tables that can be used to populate a relational database model using, for example, MySQL. So for this workshop, we're going to be using some sample data from the Getty Provenance Index, and we're going to look at some art sales from the Knoedler Gallery that took place in New York during the year 1946. This master data sheet contains 228 rows or records and 14 columns. You can see a data description here on the right with the variable or data type, and then a description of the variable. And before we really get going into how we're going to split this single data set up into a series of tables, let's first just go over quickly what a relational data model is. So a relational data model organizes your data into a series of tables containing columns, known as attributes, and rows, known as records, with an additional column for unique keys that identify each record. Each table, which is known as a relation, represents a single entity type and its accompanying attributes. And you would use this model to ensure consistency as well as making sure that you could perform combinations of queries to better understand the relationships among your data. And an additional benefit is the ability to add records and edit information without the risk of compromising other information in the total database. And you can check out the link that I've included here if you're interested in learning more about what a relational model is. So for the purposes of our sample data today, we're going to be taking our single data sheet, which we've called Knoedler main, and like I said, it contains these variables here all together. And what we're going to do is we're going to transform it into a series of 5 tables: artists, collectors, sales 1946, subject categories, and object types that can all be linked together by these different IDs or keys. And this is going to make the data a little bit more manageable if you want to create like a larger database rather than just have one simple data set. That's maybe easier to have when you're starting out with collecting your data. And the second thing that we need to know is what is data normalization? So this is the process of organizing and restructuring data attributes within the relational data model in order to reduce redundancy in the data set. So you're not going to have duplicate entries. For instance, we're talking about art sales, so maybe you have the same artist or the same buyer repeated multiple times in the original data set, but by putting them into a separate entity table, you're going to only have that name appear once in the entity table, and then when it connects, you can use the identifier, the key, over and over again to refer to that same person. And again, you can check out this link to learn more about data normalization. So again, the goals for this workshop are to demonstrate some simple steps in Excel that you can use to transform your single data spreadsheet into a series of normalized tables. So we're going to identify the data entities and the attributes in the data set. We're going to create unique value lists using the unique function. We're going to assign unique keys to new tables, populate the columns in these new tables by using the VLOOKUP function, and then relate tables using the foreign keys that we generate. And there are 2 main functions that we're going to be using in Excel for this workshop. It's the unique function, which returns a list of unique values in a list or a range. And then we're going to use the VLOOKUP function, which you can use to look up a value in a table by matching on the first column and returning the matched value. It sounds a little bit complicated, but I'm going to demonstrate how we do this, and it'll become a lot more clear as we go through the workshop itself. Okay, so we're going to just start the workshop by opening up our Excel workbook here with our sample data, and that's Nodler Master. And you can see we have one sheet in this workbook, Nodler Main, with our 14 variables that we're going to use to split up the data into a couple of different tables. And now the first step in beginning to break down a master data set like this is to identify the various data entities that you're going to use to map out your relational model. And you'll remember that we've already identified the different entities in the data set: artists, collectors, subject categories, object types, and sales 1946. These are going to be the start of our 5 new tables, and these here listed are going to be the variables that make up those different tables. And what this does basically is it says, okay, here's an entity, which is an object within the data model, and here are all of the attributes of that entity. So, for instance, we have the artist's name, but we also have here the artist's nationality, and that's not going to appear in our sales 1946 because the artist's nationality is an attribute of the artist, not an attribute of the sale. So returning now to our Excel spreadsheet, our next step, now that we've identified our data entities, is going to create unique value lists for each of these entities. So we're going to start just by opening up a new sheet, and we can double click that and we can rename this sheet object types. And the object types are going to be the first entity that we work with here. Now we're going to title our first 2 columns here type and type ID. And then we're going to go to our first cell here, and we're going to use our unique function now. So we're going to type equals unique, and you can see the function pops up here, so you can just click on that. And the array, so the range of information that we want to use, is actually in our Nodler main table. So you can click back to the sheet here, and now it's telling it we're going to pull this data from the sheet Nodler main, and we want the information in column F. So F colon F, and parentheses, that's going to grab all of the information in the entirety of column F, which is the type. And you can hit enter. And now you see it's brought up all of the different possibilities in that list, which is painting, sculpture, pastel, and watercolor. But it's also included type because we've grabbed that whole column. It's also grabbed the name of the column. But we can't just delete it because it'll delete the entire function here. So what we have to do is we have to copy that data. So copy it, and then we're going to paste it into an empty cell here. But we're going to paste special, and if we paste just the values, now we no longer have that formula in there. It's just the text. So now we actually can delete type, and it doesn't do anything to the rest of the list. It's also included 0 here. That means that there's maybe some null values in that original list. We don't need that here, so we're going to exclude that as well. And now you can delete this, copy, or cut rather, and paste this just normally into the column. So now you have a unique list with all of the different possible values for the type of artwork being sold from that data set. And now you want to assign it a unique key. And it can be as simple as saying, okay, there's only 4 values here, so it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Or if you have a longer list and you don't want to type everything out manually, you can just type your first ID number there, double click on the corner, select here, and hit fill series, and now it's automatically filled in 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't always have to start with 1. In fact, if you're dealing with multiple tables with larger amounts of data in them, you probably don't want to use 1 every single time. You can start with, say, 5,000, and then it's going to assign a 4-digit number to each of the values in that entity table. But for this one, we're just going to keep it at 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to repeat these steps for the artist column in our data set. So again, we're going to open up a new sheet. We're going to rename it artists. And we're going to assign our columns as artist name and artist ID. And in that first column under artist name, we're going to do unique. And our array is going to come from node_main, and it's going to be all of the items in column A. So if you just click the top of the column there, it'll automatically fill in the A:(A) and the parentheses and hit enter. And now you have your list. And again, we have to copy all of the values here, paste special, just the values, and then you can cut this and paste it right over that first row. Now again, you just have the text and not the formula. Again, we're going to delete this second row here because that contains the name of the original column, and we're just going to make sure that it hasn't added a 0. It has, so we can delete that as well. And now you have all of your possible artists in the list. And for here, let's start with 3,000 as our artist ID. Going to fill it down, fill series, and now you have unique keys for each of the artists. And now, as you'll remember from our relational data model, we also want to have the artist's nationality included here. So to do that, we're going to insert a new column between artist name and artist ID, and we're going to call it artist_nationality. And it would be a total pain to just go through each one of these and fill in manually the nationality for each of this artist. So what we can do is we can use a VLOOKUP function to fill in all of the values here. So we're going to do equals VLOOKUP parentheses. Now this is where it gets tricky. So the lookup value. So we want to look up the name of the artist from this table. So that's going to be A2. And we're going to separate it with a comma. And then where are we going to look it up? So which table array is going to have the information that we want? So we're going to go back to node_main, and we're going to highlight artist and artist nationality, so columns A and B, comma, the index column, so which is going to be the column that has the value that we want to be as an output. So column B does, so that's the second column in the table array, so we're going to do 2, and then comma, and the range of lookup, you can have true, which means it's an approximate match, or false, which is an exact match. False is the default, but it's always good to just put it in just in case. And then you're going to close out your parentheses and hit return. And now you can see that the artist's nationality has appeared here. And then you can double click again on this lower right hand corner just to fill down, and you can see we've now automatically entered all of the nationalities for the artists in our data set. And again, this is a formula, and you want to make sure that it's the text only. We're going to copy this entire column and paste values only. And now we have just the values again. So we can cut this and paste it right over that column. So now this table is complete. Artist name, artist nationality, and the artist ID. So quickly going back to the relational data model that we looked at earlier, we've now completed our object types and our artist table. And the next one that we're going to do is the collectors. You know, it's possible that the people who are selling artworks are sometimes people buying artworks and vice versa. So maybe it's useful to just have all of our collectors, all of these people who could be either buyers or sellers, in one single table. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, in this next step, all of the data from the sellers and the buyers to create a unique value set for collectors. So we're going to go back to our Excel workbook, and we're going to, again, open up a new sheet, and we're going to call this one Collectors now. Go back to Nodler main, and we're going to select the entire column M for seller, and we're going to copy that and paste that right into our collectors sheet. We can delete this top row because that's just the column name from the previous sheet. And then we're going to go back to Nodler main, and we're going to just select the first entry there, scroll down, hit shift and click to select everything under the column name. We're going to copy that, go back to collectors, go to the bottom of our collectors list here, and we're going to paste those values in. Okay, so now we have all of the possible sellers and buyers in one column here. And now we're going to go and we're going to use that unique function again. So first let's title the columns. We're going to have collector underscore name and collector underscore ID. And then in B2 here, we're doing our unique list. So we're going to do equal unique parentheses everything in column A from this sheet. So A colon A, and then close that parentheses and hit return. And now we have our unique value list here. Again, it's just the formulas in there, and we want to have the text. So we're going to copy that whole thing, that whole column B, and we're going to paste special values into column D there. And now we can cut this entire section, paste it over to have our unique values just, and we can delete that first column. So now we have column A, collector name with our unique values, and column B, where we're going to put our collector ID. And you'll see here we have another 0 for those nulls. We're going to highlight that whole row and just delete that out. And now we can do like before and assign our unique value keys to each of our collectors. I'm going to start with 5,000, double click there on the corner and make sure it's set to fill series. So now we're going to go through this process again for our category 1 and category 2 variables. If you want, you can pause the video and try to do it on your own, but I'm just going to go through the process really quickly now. Subject categories, and we're going to have here all of the possible categories from category 1. Delete column name. Pull down here. Back to no domain. And everything from category 2. Copy that. And paste it here. And we're going to have category and category underscore ID. This is going to use that unique function again for all of column A. We're going to paste special just to get the values. Can now delete that first column. Oops. And cut this and paste it there. Delete our 0 out. And let's see. Let's assign it starting with 50. And fill series. Great. And we can go ahead and save that for now. So now we have our 4 normalized tables here. And remember, we have to make one more. That's for the sales in 1946. And to make that, we're gonna do things a little bit differently. Here we want to have the object title, the dimensions, the sale year, sale month, sale day, sales total, and the sales currency. But we're also going to include foreign keys or the ID numbers for the following variables from our other tables. So we're going to have artist ID, category 1 ID, category 2 ID, type ID, seller ID, and buyer ID. And then finally, we're going to create a sale ID column to act as a primary key in this new table that we're calling sales 1946. And here we're going to use a lot of that VLOOKUP function. So let's start a new sheet again. You don't have to name this just yet. And we're going to click up here in the corner to select all of the data from our original sheet. And we're going to copy all of that and paste it into our new sheet. Okay. And now we want to start filling in those IDs. So let's start with the artist ID. So we're going to click the top here of column B and insert a new column between artist and artist nationality. And we're going to call this column artist underscore ID. And here we're going to use our VLOOKUP to fill in the artist ID by looking up the name here, similar to what we did when we were filling in the artist nationality, but this time we're going to fill in the artist ID from our artist table. So equals VLOOKUP, click there. We're going to look up the value, the name of the artist there, comma. We're going to use our artists table as the table array. So we can select all that, A through C. And it's really important here that the value that you're looking up is the value in that first column of the table. So here, keep that in mind. Comma. So the output we want is the artist ID. So that's the third column. So we're going to put a 3 here. And then again, we want it to be an exact match. So we're going to type false, end the parentheses, and hit enter. And now we have our artist ID. We can double click the corner here and that'll fill down for each of the artists in our data set. Okay. So next we want to do the same for our object category and our object category 2. So again, we're going to add that column in, and this is going to be category underscore 1, category 1 underscore ID. We're going to do a VLOOKUP. for our category 1, here it's genre, comma, our table array is going to be from subject categories in columns A and B. We want the category ID from our second column here, and we want it to be an exact match, end parentheses, and return. And then again, fill down. And then we're going to repeat it again for category 2. VLOOKUP in there. It's going to be the same table because we combine those together, comma, again, it's our second column, comma, false for exact matches, and enter. And here you have an NA. That's because this has a null value, so it can't find anything in our value list. That's okay. We're not going to deal with that now. We'll deal with that at the end. So again, you can fill it down, and you'll see that when it did have a value, it gave us the correct category ID. Again, we're going to call this category 2 underscore ID. We also have a table for the type. So we're going to insert a column there, and this is going to be type ID. This is going to tell us what type of object was being sold. And again, VLOOKUP. We're looking up the value there in the second row for painting. Our table array is in object types. We've only got these 4 options here, but we're going to select that, comma again, and again we want the second column to be our output, and we want an exact match, return. It's reading it as a text, so we have to make sure we switch this to general. There we go. And then we can fill that down. And all of this, we don't have tables for that, but we do have tables for our buyers and sellers. Again, that's the collector ID that we're going to use. So this new column is going to be seller underscore ID. We're going to do VLOOKUP again. We're looking up our seller's name. We're looking it up in the collector's table. And we want the second column to be our output. And we want it to be an exact match. Return. And we have our seller ID there now. Again, our blanks have come up as null. That's perfectly fine. And then finally, we're going to do our last column, which is going to be buyer ID. You can actually just select this and copy the formula because it's going to be the same. We're just going to, instead of the Q, we're going to look for S2 and then fill that down. Great. So now you have all of these values set in, but again, remember we're dealing with formulas and we want just the text. So we're going to copy everything into a new sheet, paste special, just the values, and it's this sheet that we're going to call sales underscore 1946. We can go ahead and delete our sheet 7 now. Yes. And now that we have these IDs in our table, we don't need the column with the information. So we can go ahead and delete artist. You'll remember that the artist nationality is linked to the artist ID in our artist table. So we can go ahead and delete the nationality of the artist as well. Our category 1, category 2, type, seller, and buyer are all included in the different tables linked by these IDs. So we can go ahead and delete those columns. And this is now our final table for sales 1946, which can be connected to the data in our other columns via these ID numbers or keys. And the one final step just for cleaning this up is, again, we have these null values. If you're going to put this in a program such as MySQL to create your relational database, you want to make sure that you don't have any blank cells, and you want to make sure that any nulls actually come up NULL. So first we're going to make sure that all of our blank cells are filled in with a null. And for this, we're going to do a replace up in the upper right hand corner. What are we searching for? We're searching for a completely blank cell. Always safe just to match the case and make sure you hit find entire cells only. And we're going to replace it with null in all caps. And we can replace all. You can see it's made 106 replacements. And in this blank area here where we, for instance, didn't have a sales price, it's also put null, so that's good. And now we want to replace all of the hashtag and /a's, and we want to make those also null just to be consistent. So we're going to replace all and some 234 replacements, and you can see we have all nulls here. And we can close that out. And we're all set. So now if you are setting up a database using MySQL or something similar to that, what you can do now is you can take each of these sheets and you can save them as a CSV, which will allow you to then have your tables ready to upload and populate your relational database model. So that's all we have for this workshop today. The written instructions can be found alongside this video, as well as a link to the PowerPoint slides. Thank you.